Every human being who has ever lived has wondered about death. But what's strange is not that we wonder, it's how differently death seems to answer us. Some people die and remember another life. Some die and enter what they describe as heaven. Some leave their bodies and watch themselves being pronounced dead. Some experience their entire life replayed in seconds, every word, every choice, every consequence. And here's the part almost no one asks clearly. Why are the experiences so different? And what determines which one you experience? If death is one event, why does it produce multiple outcomes? Why reincarnation for some? Why light and peace for others? Why a brutal moral life review for some and silence for others? Is death random or is it personal? What if death isn't a destination but a process? And what if the experience you have after death depends less on where you go and more on where and when you arrive? We are not asking whether these experiences are comforting. We're asking whether they are revealing. Because if even a fraction of these reports are genuine, then death is not the great equalizer, it's the great mirror. What if identity didn't start at birth? Before we look at stories, we need to understand what reincarnation cases are actually claiming. These are not beliefs, not doctrines, not philosophical positions. They are cases where memory appears before identity. Children, usually between the ages of 2 and 5, begin speaking about lives that ended before they were born. Not symbolically, not vaguely, specifically. Names, places, occupations, modes and methods of death, and sometimes even physical marks. What makes these cases unsettling is not just that they exist, but that they follow patterns. The memories begin early, they fade with age, they involve sudden or violent death, they carry emotional residue, fear, longing and grief. So the real question reincarnation research raises isn't do souls come back, it's can memory survive the destruction of the brain? Because if memory can survive, then identity may not begin at birth, it may continue. So Dorothy Eady, the woman who remembered Egypt, she was born in London in 1904. At age 3 she fell down a staircase and doctors pronounced her dead. Minutes later she was revived, and from that moment on she cried constantly, not for her parents but for home. She said her real home had been taken away from her. She said she had lived in a temple by the river, and she said she had a loving king. As she grew older, the memories didn't fade, they sharpened. She recognised hieroglyphs without being taught. She knew religious rituals that weren't performed publicly or even documented. She described underground chambers at Abydos before they were excavated. When she finally travelled to Egypt as an adult and stood in the temple, she collapsed to her knees and kissed the stone floor. She said, "This is where I lived, and this is where I died." Egyptologists were unsettled, not because she believed this, but because she was often correct. Some of the information she shared was confirmed years later. So ask yourself, if memory belongs only to the brain, how did she access a part that wasn't hers, and even a past? And what about James Leninger, the child who died at war? He was 2 years old when the nightmares began. Not childish dreams, violent, detailed nightmares. He screamed about being trapped in a burning plane. He said his plane was shot down. He named aircraft models. He said the Japanese were responsible. He said his name used to be James Huston. His parents assumed imagination until they checked military records. James Hudson Jr., US Navy pilot, killed in 1945, plane shot down over the Pacific. Even the aircraft carrier James named, Natoma Bay, was real. And then something crucial happened. As James grew older, the memories faded. By around age 7, they were mostly gone. Why would memory survive death, but not childhood? And then there's the birthmark cases. Dr. Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist at the University of Virginia, documented over 2,500 reincarnation cases. He was not mystical, he was not cautious, he was methodical and skeptical. Many of these children he studied had birthmarks or deformities that matched the fatal wounds of the deceased individuals they claimed to remember. Gunshot wounds, knife wounds, burn scars. One child was born into life with 2 circular marks. The previous person died from a gunshot wound, entry and exit, in those exact locations. Stevenson concluded that reincarnation is the least inadequate explanation, not proof, but a problem science hasn't solved, which brings us to the first fracture in the materialist window. If reincarnation happens sometimes, why not always? What about near-death and heaven experiences? Near-death experiences are fundamentally different from reincarnation cases. Reincarnation deals with memory across lives. Near-death experiences deal with consciousness without a functioning brain. In these cases, people are not speculating. They were clinically dead. No heartbeat, no oxygen to the brain, minimal or absent electrical activity. And yet, they reported structured, meaningful experiences. Clarity, awareness, presence, often more real than life. There's Pam Reynolds, who was awake during death. She underwent an extreme brain surgery. Her body temperature was lowered, her heart stopped, her EEG flatlined. By every medical definition, she was dead. Yet she later described the surgical bone saw that was used, the shape of the instruments, conversations between the doctors, the music playing in the operating room. Her eyes were taped shut, her ears were blocked with speakers emitting clicks. Then she described leaving her body, moving through darkness, encountering a presence of overwhelming love, a presence that communicated without words. She was told, or at least understood, that she had to return. And then she did. Was it a hallucination? Perhaps. But hallucinations don't usually provide verifiable external information. And then there was Eben Alexander. He was a Harvard-trained neurosurgeon. He dismissed near-death experiences as hallucinations until bacterial meningitis destroyed his neocortex, the part of the brain required for conscious experience. During this time, he experienced hyperreal awareness, a realm more vivid than waking life, a sense of infinite intelligence, a message, you are loved, you have nothing to fear. When he recovered, he said, the brain does not create consciousness, it filters it. Which leads to a destabilizing question. If heaven-like experiences happen, why don't all deaths produce them? And why is it that some of these people, instead of just experiencing speaking to another infinite being, they actually experience some form of heaven, a bright light that they go towards? So is that heaven? Is it a being? Is it a god? Is it the universe? How is it that that person or those people can understand those experiences when they come back to life? And then what about out-of-body and life reviews? Out-of-body experiences are when people leave their bodies and observe events later verified. Women have described shoes on hospital roofs, found exactly where they said it would. They hear conversations in adjacent rooms, staff entering and leaving. These are the veridical perceptions. And even one genuine case is a serious problem, because hallucinations don't see reality clearly. And then there's the life review. People don't watch their life like a film, they experience it all at once from every perspective. They feel the pain they caused others, the kindness they withheld, the love they never noticed they gave. No voice judging them, no God condemning them. Almost everyone says the same thing. I judged myself. Which brings us to the real question: what determines the experience? At this point, we can no longer avoid it. If, based on these experiences, reincarnation happens to some, if heaven-like experiences and meeting deities happen to others, and what about life reviews and out-of-body experiences happen to many? Why not everyone? And more disturbingly, why this experience for this person? So let's remove one explanation immediately. If these were random neurological events, we would expect randomness, but we don't, we see patterns. So what if death doesn't produce an experience? What if it removes interference? Think of consciousness like light through a prism. The brain doesn't generate the light, it shapes it. Damage the prism, perception distorts. Remove the prism, the light spreads. This would explain why consciousness sometimes intensifies at death, why people, and especially a variety of people, have experienced different aspects of this, why memory, unity and review all appear, which leads to a radical idea. You don't become something after death, you experience what was already there. And then what about across life review accounts? A disturbing pattern also emerges. People who lived unconsciously report overwhelming moral clarity. People who lived reflectively report peace. No reward, no punishment, amplification. So ask yourself, if every suppressed truth surfaced at once, would that feel like heaven or terror? And then 1,000 people say the same thing, don't they? With the life review. There's no judge, there's no deity speaking, no sentence handed down, just awareness, which raises a dangerous possibility. What if morality is not enforced, but inescapable? Not judged by God, judged by your own restored consciousness? Or what if it is judged? What if that experience is the judgment? And in all of these examples, the reason that we understand these things is because those people have come back to life to explain their experiences. And then what about reincarnation? Is it unfinished identity? Because reincarnation cases often involve sudden death, strong attachment, unresolved purpose. So what if reincarnation isn't punishment but momentum? Like a sentence that wasn't finished, not failure but incompletion and unfinished business. Because there are ways to interpret this. What if heaven-like experiences are the same for everyone? Because they generally experience loss of ego, absence of fear, and a sense of unity. Maybe these aren't rewards. Maybe they're states of consciousness cultivated through presence, compassion, and reduced attachment. So maybe heaven isn't somewhere you go. Maybe it's something you become capable of perceiving. And are these experiences sequential, not exclusive? What if reincarnation, life review, and transcendence aren't alternatives, but layers? Maybe the review is to integration. Integration is to release, and failure to integrate is continuation. Not belief, not doctrine, but process. So maybe reincarnation isn't punishment. Maybe it's unfinished work. Maybe heaven isn't a reward. Maybe it's coherence. Maybe the life review isn't imposed. Maybe it's inevitable. And maybe the question of God is the wrong question. Because whether there is a deity or not, the evidence suggests something far more intimate. You experience yourself. Fully. Without distraction, without narrative, without excuses. Death may not be a courtroom. It may be a mirror. And one day you will look into it, not as you hoped you were, but as you actually lived.